Around the 5th century CE, a Sanskrit writer flourished who became the second great name in the grammarian tradition after Panini. This man, named Bhartrihari, is generally associated with two major works, the Vakyapadya, or Treatise on Words and Sentences, and a collection of poetry called the Shtakatraya, although it is uncertain as to whether both these works were authored by the same person. The Chinese traveller Yi Jing mentions the existence of Bhartrihari, although claims that he was a Buddhist. However, from his work it appears that he is better situated within the Brahminical tradition, although his work was influential on later such important Buddhist thinkers as Dignaga. Bhartrihari's most important work, the Vakyapadya, is built upon the work of previous grammarians, but it is radical in that it moves grammar from the margin to the centre of philosophical analysis. He does this so by arguing that grammar can be considered a darshana, or school of philosophy, which provides insight into the ultimate nature of reality. For Bhartrihari, language has the potentiality to take us to the heights of human capabilities. Thus, in the first kanda of the text, he defines the scope of his inquiry, the structure of language, the correspondence between meaning and words, and the spiritual merit obtained by the correct use of language. However, Bhartrihari does not necessarily mean that the correct use of language coincides with the elite conception of pure language compared to vulgar language of daily use. This is a position that divided earlier grammarians, some of who saw the unchanging nature of the elite register to represent a link to a true and unchanging understanding of the world. On the other hand, the conventionalists, including Panini and Bhartrihari, argued that natural language was prior to this excessively formal register, which drew upon the concepts and components of day-to-day speech to develop. Bhartrihari draws upon aspects of Vedic mythology and Vedanta philosophy to assert that language has a divine origin and precedes the creation of all other things through the endless cycle of creation and destruction. If language thus precedes all creation, Bhartrihari muses, then it be conceived as the basis of reality, Brahman, expressing and embodying itself in the plurality that is the everyday world of objects that arise from the monism of Brahman itself. Bhartrihari gives this language substance the name Shabda Brahman, translated as word principle. This Shabda Brahman concept puts him at odds with the Nyaya school of logicians, who saw language as arising from sentient beings, a temporal rather than eternal phenomena, created by men or gods. Furthermore, this position of language as eternal leads to the troubling issue of how, from a consistent and unchanging material, the plurality of experienced language occurs. Even more concerning, how does Bhartrihari unite his conventionalist understanding of language with the concept of Shabda Brahman? As a potential solution to this issue, some scholars argue that Bhartrihari refers to the term eternal, akshara, to refer to phonemes, the smallest unit of meaningful sound. It is these phonemes which Bhartrihari sees as eternal, and it is their infinite combination which results in conventional plurality. For Bhartrihari, it is these primal phonemes which in turn form the origin of consciousness. This claim is based upon his belief that cognitive objects and their relations are word-determined, regardless of if they are quote-unquote physical objects based on sensory perception or conceptual objects purely of the mind. If this interpretation is true, it is clear that Bhartrihari is arguing that this word conditioning of the mind must be a priori, and thus is evidence for the eternal nature of the word principle. However, the most important aspect of Bhartrihari's philosophy of language comes to the issue of meaning and its correspondence to the language we use in day-to-day life. To describe this, Bhartrihari develops the theory of Sphota. This theory itself draws upon the work of much earlier grammarians, which is referenced in the work of Panini. In its original sense, the Sphota means spoken language, with the dhavani, or audible sound, as its special quality. Yet, for Bhartrihari, the audible sound of the speaker can vary massively, but the Sphota, which he conceives as the meaning unit of speech, is invariable. This is because Bhartrihari sees the meaning as conveyed not by the phoneme nor the word, but by the sentence. By this, Bhartrihari argues that the sentence is the indivisible one speech unit long messenger unit for a singular unit of meaning. Although a sentence can obviously be parsed into words, roots, suffixes, and prefixes, these are merely abstractions that aid in our understanding of the spoken word, but are not necessarily divisions that exist with the underlying and inseparable meaning of said sentence. The Sphota thus arises as a singular whole in the speaker. This singular whole then, like a flash or spark, leads the speaker to conceptualize the specific sounds of the sentence. The speaker then performs the act of speaking towards the listener. These sounds then induce within the listener's own mind the original Sphota, at least if the communication has occurred correctly. This leads to a singularly interesting question. What ensures that meaning is not misinterpreted between individuals? Why doesn't one Sphota, if incorrectly interpreted, lead to the arising of a different Sphota in the mind of the other? For Bhartrihari, the foundation of his theory of language, the Shabda Brahman, provides the answer. The word principle provides the substrate from which both Sphota derive their meaning. Therefore, the spoken word only acts as a spark which sets the intuition of the other speaker ablaze. The Sphota arises whole within their own consciousness. This becomes important when one considers the issue of the truth in the Vedas, a principal concern of Vedic exeges. Thus, the Shabda Brahman acts as the wellspring from which the Vedic truth can emerge, divorced from the conventions of any one singular or specific language. Although the link between Shabda Brahman, the Sphota, and spoken languages in Bhartrihari now appears clear, his claim extended beyond this to the way in which language shapes our perception of reality. He suggested that the parts of speech, verbs, nouns, adjectives, and adverbs, shape how we categorize the objects of our daily experience and how we conceive of reality as a whole. This means, for Bhartrihari, language does not emerge from our sensory experience, as would be argued by some Buddhists, but instead is embedded in the sensory process, what would be in modern Western linguistics called a strong Worfian position. Besides this elaborate system of language and philosophy, Bhartrihari identified several paradoxes which emerge from logical and linguistic relations. One of these is the commonly known liar's paradox. Everything I say is false. However, Bhartrihari also identified another paradox regarding objects which are described as unnameable or unsignifable. He states that clearly, by calling said object unnameable, we have clearly just made it nameable as the unnamed object. This paradox has come to be known as the Bhartrihari paradox in celebration of the thinker. Bhartrihari's position remained influential amongst the grammarians. However, it was rejected by the other two major schools of Vedic philosophy which dealt most extensively with language, the Mimamsa and the Nyaya, as well as the Buddhists. Although compared to other Indian philosophers and thinkers, his influence in the Western academy in modern times has been slight. However, his ideas tackle the same difficult issues of language and meaning as seen in thinkers as diverse as Chomsky and Wittgenstein.